Howdy, folks. I'm Colonel Sanders, and you're not. YouTube is telling me that one of the highest searched keywords for my channel for people to find me is Colonel Sanders Sues KFC. I want to talk about this again because I have talked about it in short form videos, lots of them. I haven't really dived into it in a video like this, which seems to get more attention for people to sit down and learn something. So what I see from all these little documentary videos that people put out, AI generated ones, they're confusing folks by saying Colonel Sanders was sued once by Kentucky Fried Chicken and he countersued them once. But they're bunching up two different events into one event. I want to cover that. They're also confusing people, telling them that it was the people the Colonel sold Kentucky Fried Chicken to that he sued. That's inaccurate too. So we're going to dive into this. We're going to give you an understanding. For those new here, I'm Colonel Sanders, three great nephew. I am heavily informed on the history of my family legacy and the Kentucky Fried Chicken brand. So the first thing we're going to cover is the Claudia Sanders Dinner House. Many of you have heard about it because it's trending right now online. People are talking quite a bit about it. Well, the Claudia Sanders Dinner House was formerly known as the Colonel's Lady. And the lawsuit that sparked in the 1970s between Colonel Sanders and Kentucky Fried Chicken partly stemmed from that restaurant, but it wasn't made out of spite like people say it was. Uncle Harley sold out in the mid-1960s to Governor John Y. Brown Jr. and Jack C. Massey. He then began development of a restaurant for his wife so he could continue on his own terms serving food to the general public in Kentucky. This was not meant to compete or despite Kentucky Fried Chicken. He made it shortly after. I believe it opened in 1969. Don't hold me to that. It's within that time frame. Brown and Massey still owned Kentucky Fried Chicken at that time. They did not have an issue with him running that restaurant. They didn't even threaten to sue him over that restaurant. What had happened was Brown and Massey sold out to Hillblind in 1971 for a lot of money, over $200 million. My uncle didn't see a penny of that because he refused to invest in shares in the company. Massey tried to get him to and offered to pay for it and to get him set up and do everything they needed to do. But Uncle Harley said no, he didn't want them. He didn't understand them, and he just didn't want the money. Now, when it comes to that, he had also started 99X, a seasoning that he challenged Bill Summers at Mary & K Spices to create based off of the flavor of his original 11. He never gave the list of the original 11 to Bill Summers. He wanted to test them to see if they could recreate his recipe using pure ingredients and no corners cut. Uncle Harley said it tasted good enough, and he asked John Y. Brown Jr. and Jack C. Massey if they can use Mary & K Spices to supply the mix. He trusted them with the 11. But he couldn't just give them the 11. That would have been against the contract when he sold out in '64. See, prior to this, my uncle, his second wife, Claudia, and my cousin Lee would be the primary sources of mixing the recipe, packaging it, and then sending it out to franchisees. Claudia was the main mixer of it. And despite what rumors and lies you hear on the internet, no, she did not go around handing it to every nephew and niece in her family. Just like the Colonel didn't go around handing it to every nephew, niece, and grandchild in his family. It was a secret, and people kept their words back then. But as you can imagine, with Brown and Massey expanding Kentucky Fried Chicken the way they were, Uncle Harley and Claudia didn't have the capacity to keep up demand. So they needed a company. Uncle Harley knew that they needed a company because it was talked about within the company. Well, what Brown and Massey did was contract out with Sexton and Stange. I don't know how many years the contract was before it expired, but they had already signed in a contract when they bought out the company. Uncle Harley had asked them if they could use Mary & K. He trusted them with it. And they said no, because they have already signed a contract with Sexton and Stange to make half of the recipe in one place, half of it in another, sent to one for mixing, and then sent out to the franchisees. That way, no one place can do the full thing. Well, Uncle Harley wanted Mary & K to do it. They couldn't do it, but he went ahead and went through with them creating 99X, the variant of his recipe for the Colonel's Lady. And this was perfectly fine with Brown and Massey. See, Brown and Massey weren't going to break their contract because they already did that with Carter's, another franchisee of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Before The standalone locations, Kentucky Fried Chicken was franchised through existing restaurants such as Jack Pirtle's, Carter's, Champs, Scott's Chicken Villa. You had Harmon's Cafe, the first franchise of Kentucky Fried Chicken featuring Kentucky Fried Chicken. You had the Sanders Cafe featuring Kentucky Fried Chicken. You had all these different restaurants featuring Kentucky Fried Chicken. So they sold their own restaurant meals alongside of the Kentucky Fried Chicken brand. Whatever was purchased for KFC branded stuff, that money had their contract or agreement with Colonel Sanders, and they would give him a nickel for every whole chicken sold. As time went on, demand went on, inflation was a thing, and prices went up a little bit more. Although you used for almost $2 to be able to feed a family of 6. Isn't that crazy now? So anyways, Brown and Massey broke their contract with Carter's, got sued for $1 million, and Carter's won. What that was Brown and Massey started comprising new franchising agreements that the existing restaurants had to forfeit their restaurant name and start selling out of standalone locations at Kentucky Fried Chicken. Some of the franchisees didn't want to do this. They wanted to keep their original agreement. So what Brown and Massey did was open within a radius of Carter's standalone Kentucky Fried Chicken locations, and people wanted KFC more than they wanted Carter's, right? Because it's popping, it's the new thing, it's big, it's expanding, people want it, there's more of it. Well, this took away the business from Carter's, and Carter's had already purchased $1 million worth of Kentucky Fried Chicken packaging and products, and that they no longer could sell. They were out at $1 million. So they sued Brown and Massey for violating their original agreement and ended up winning. After that, Brown and Massey no longer cut their contracts. They didn't break their contracts or agreements. They allowed Jack Pirtle's to finish out his 10-year agreement with Colonel Sanders with his franchising Kentucky Fried Chicken after that lawsuit with Carter's. After that, Jack Pirtle's became its own standalone restaurant, parting ways from Kentucky Fried Chicken. So we get to 1971. Huelblind purchased it. They are an alcohol beverage company. They purchased it from Brown and Massey. Huelblind, the parent company now, that bought it from the two men, didn't like that Colonel Sanders had another restaurant with the Colonel in the name, and they accused him of selling his original recipe out of there. Well, he countersued them for misuse of his name and image and for changing his recipe and quality. He said, and I quote, "I wanted to see how much of my name and soul they owned." Well, they settled that lawsuit. That lawsuit was settled for $1 million. Uncle Harley would be paid $1 million by Huelblind, the parent company, not Brown and Massey. And in return, he had to sell the Colonel's Lady and change the name of the Colonel's Lady. You see, in the mid to late 1960s, Shelbyville, Kentucky, his Blackhall Manor, the mansion he lived in, was the headquarters for Kentucky Fried Chicken. Before the 60s, sorry. After he moved out of Corbin and it became a raging success, he purchased the mansion and he spent a lot of money and time renovating that mansion. And that served as headquarters for Kentucky Fried Chicken. Then when he sold out, they moved headquarters to Tennessee. 1970, Colonel Sanders made Brown move it back to Kentucky. Sound familiar? They're moving it to Texas now. But there's no influence from the Colonel's family today to convince them not to move it to Texas. But I will speak my mind on it on any podcast or late night shows that I get invited on. And before haters start to come here to hate, I have a lot of followers on other platforms. I'm very well known on other platforms, just not here on YouTube. And I'm referring to Stephen Colbert, who I made friends with over on TikTok, and many other podcasters, late night host shows, and other content creators. I have a bag full of famous mutuals that I could go on and talk about this. But anyways, the family doesn't have any influence or say in the business anymore. And quite frankly, it doesn't look like the company cares right now because there's not this big push by the people who give them money, the consumers, to go back to their roots and involve the family again. I'm interested in doing it, making things right, and bringing some more respect to it. He had to sell the Colonel's Lady and change the name. So he picked his friends, the Settles family, sold it to them. But he also sold the mansion, which explains why in 1973, when my grandfather brought my father and uncle to Uncle Harley's mansion to meet them for the first time, he wasn't there. He met the Settles family, had no idea who they were. They gave him the address. He moved to LaGrange Road. Now, he did have the home up in Mississauga, Canada, but that was a part-time home for 4 to 5 months out of the year, where he stayed to maintain the franchises in Canada that he kept under his name until 1972, and he couldn't sell it to anybody, so he made a charity and gave it to charity. That money helped put people through school. Today, KFC Canada is tarnishing his image by having a clown dress up as him with Converse shoes, pretend to be the Colonel Sanders, and get a bunch of Canadians and famous influencer in Canada to get on board with disrespecting the Colonel's image without any regards of how the looks about the Colonel, the brand, or even the Colonel's family, how they feel about that. Because we certainly didn't like it when they did it in the United States. And I made that clear. That's why I'm here today. But I am grateful they did it because it gave me that fiery rage to get on here and start talking about the history. I had no idea how many people weren't actually informed on the real history of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Were following all these rumors. So he had to sell it. So he sold the mansion along with the Claudia Sanders Dinner House. They changed the name. They continue to use 99X today. And he moved to LaGrange Road. From 1975 to 1980, that was his main residence, was LaGrange Road. He also lived in Florida part-time for his vacationing. He had a vacation home down there. And I got something cool to tell you guys at the end of this video. I have mentioned it in the past, but not many people saw it. So stay tuned. I want to show you something. I guarantee if you haven't been on this page for a long time, you have not seen this photo. You have not heard this story. So anyways, all's going good. Brown and Massey had put him on the Board of Quality Control. After in 1970, they moved it back to Kentucky, the headquarters, this time in Louisville. So that bumped his $45,000 a year salary, or $40,000 a year salary for being the spokesperson, to $75,000 a year salary. That's how much he made, the Colonel, off of just being the spokesperson and maintaining his quality. There are a lot of rumors going around that the Colonel had no right to go into the restaurant and say this is slop and it needs to be done right. He did, because in 1970, he was given that seat on the Board of Directors of Food and Quality Control, giving him the right to maintain his quality. So from that point until his death, that's what he did. So you get into the late 1970s, he gets sued again by Kentucky Fried Chicken, but not the corporation. This is where people are getting it confused. They're saying that this happened twice or once, whatever it is. I've seen so many different stories, just mixed matching the information. He was sued by a franchisee that owned the Bowling Green franchises. Uncle Harley was calling it slop because they were cutting corners. It was slop. It was trash. Like the Central City Kentucky Fried Chicken I went to, they didn't like it very much when I spoke the truth on it. Bowling Green was trash in regard to the Colonel's quality. So the owners sued him for defamation of their restaurants. When they got to court, the judge said, the Colonel is the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken. The Colonel set the standards for what the quality is supposed to be, what his chicken is supposed to taste like, and how it's supposed to be done. The founder could absolutely criticize and correct the issues within the restaurant, especially since he had the title of Board of Directors of Food and Quality Control. He had the right to criticize their food and to tell them to correct it. But they tried suing him over it. The judge threw that out of court and said that he had every right to do what he did. So right there, not only as a customer, but as the head of the Board of Food and Quality Control, he had the right to criticize their food. And as the founder, he knew what his quality was versus what it wasn't. So he was sued twice by Kentucky Fried Chicken. Once by the corporation, which was the parent company, Hillblind, not the first people who bought it, Brown and Massey. Brown and Massey didn't buy it from him, turn around and sue him, like a lot of comments are saying. Brown and Massey bought it from him, tolerated him, he tolerated them. They put him on the Board of Directors of Quality Control. They respected his wishes. They sold it to Hillblind. Hillblind bought it from Brown and Massey, turned around and sued the founder. They didn't want the competition, but it didn't work out in their favor. The Colonel was a thorn in Kentucky Fried Chicken's side till the day he died, because he made sure things were done right. And if it wasn't done right, he made sure people knew it wasn't done right. And it doesn't sit well with him when things not being done right. And if you can't do it right, get it out of the way, let someone who can do it right do it. But he was sued on 2 separate occasions. And the second one was a franchisee that was just pissed off because the colonel said it was slop and they didn't like being called out for cutting corners. So back in the day, Uncle Harley would have his pressure cookers taken out of the restaurants and his seasonings taken out, and he would revoke his franchising agreement, which was on a handshake at the time, with the franchisees that were cutting corners and not doing things right. Couldn't necessarily do that later on in the 70s because now it is industrially being provided, the pressure cookers, by Winston, because Winston took his original design and perfected it to be able to do a filtration system for the cracklings to be able to make the gravy. He made a better version of the pressure cooker or pressure fryer than Uncle Harley had. And those were owned by the franchisees because they would purchase those. So all he could do is tell them that it was right or that it wasn't right. So he was sued once in the early 70s and sued again in the late 70s. Two separate occasions, two different things. It was a different company, I believe, by then. I think R.J. Reynolds had purchased it. He saw the two things he despised most, booze and cigarettes, owning his life work. Before he died, he got to see an alcohol beverage company sell it to a cigarette company, and he wasn't around when they sold it to PepsiCo. And then PepsiCo spun off in 97 Trincon, which was a company that was spun off to manage the restaurants. They changed the name later on in 2002 to Yum Brands. That's who owns it today. YouTube told me you guys are looking for the story of Colonel Sanders being sued by KFC and suing KFC. That's the story. There were two occasions, and it basically worked out in his favor for both of them. One was thrown out. The other one was settled. Or now to the story I told you earlier. Colonel Sanders had a vacation home in Florida. I'm told he had one in California too, but we're going to focus the one on Florida. It was in Tampa, Florida. His daughter, Margaret, lived in Florida too. Now, Funko has partnered with Kentucky Fried Chicken in the past. I think you guys should partner again with them, especially since you partnered with them with this Funko Fusion game. You should partner with them again. Bring these back, but I have a variant for you. Uncle Harley wore Hawaiian shirts and shorts when he wasn't working for Kentucky Fried Chicken, when he was on break, taking relaxing days vacation. He wore Hawaiian shirts and shorts, especially down in Florida. You can make one of these with that variant, and I think it would be a very good idea, a very cool idea. See, I'm okay with bringing things like this that honor Uncle Harley's image in the newer day and modern pop culture. I'm okay with that because it's not changing who he is as a person and portraying him like a moron or sexualizing him or doing anything weird like that. I'm big on board with putting him in Fortnite, putting him in video games, especially ones that I play and stream. I'd love that. I'd love to see that. That keeps his image and memory alive in a good way rather than sexualizing him as a stripper or portraying him as a complete imbecile or creep. I think that is the way to go, especially if you're not going to hire me or anyone from the family to represent his legacy. I don't want to impersonate my uncle. I can, but I don't want to. I want to represent the legacy and what he stood for with the business. But anyways, Funko, if you see that, partner with them again. Come out with some more of those and think about that variant idea. I think that's a good idea. This photo is Uncle Harley with his niece, Karen Cummings, who is Karen Edwards today, Lee Cummings' daughter. And this was in Tampa, Florida. I bet you haven't seen that photo before, and that would make a really cool Funko Pop. I'm just saying, you could put that variant in the game too. We're currently streaming that on here. A lot of people follow me for the chicken lore, the history and all that. But for 11 years, this page has been a gaming page, and that is what I intend on continuing to do. However, we did just spin off a shorts page. There's 10 subscribers right now. I don't really believe in making different channels for different content, especially when I already put everything on here. But many of you have suggested it, so I'm giving it a try. And if it proves itself, we'll be putting a lot of the gaming content over there and keeping a lot more of just the history on this page. But I really want to focus on this page growing. This is the page I could go live on and stream. We've been streaming Funko Fusion, and there's been a lot of history references to Kentucky Fried Chicken and other things related to it. And we're hunting for those buckets so we can unlock Uncle Harley in the game. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe. That helps out a lot, boosts the algorithm. It keeps me from having to go to TikTok and beg 300,000 people to follow me on here. That's how many followers I have on there. And it keeps me from going to Instagram begging 67,000 people to come over here. It's very difficult to do. We only got 6,000 on here, but I appreciate every single one of you, and I hope to continue entertaining you. I hope you learned something. If you have a question, leave it in the comments. If I already answered it, I'll link you the video. If I didn't, I'll reply to your comment. Ciao.